Namaste to all of you and good evening. I'm happy to see you again in a Satsang. We don't manage to do those too often lately. And tonight it is my intention to continue with some presentation of Hatha Yoga Pradipika. We were in the middle of chapter 3, which was a very difficult chapter. It deals with the mudras and with Kundalini Yoga. Hatha Yoga Pradipika is a very precise text and it's very technical. It rivals only with Gyananda Samhita, who is an equally technical text. These technical texts, people have asked me, make a commentary, explain, make us understand shloka by shloka, and I'm very happy to do that. The problem is that sometimes they become very dry because you've got tens of shlokas where you just have to go from one technique to the next, from one technique to the next. It's like an endless yoga course where you get to speak about yoga techniques very briefly, very aphoristically, and you don't get to do them, to perform them, to show them to people, to perform them and feel the effects, feel the results of it, and that in the end it becomes a bit overwhelming. I remember people were complaining about the dryness of yoga texts years ago when I did the satsangs on the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, which I suppose they are up on the net. A little bit less complaints were when I did the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, which all in all has 18 chapters, so like 1/3 of Bhagavad Gita. Because Bhagavad Gita is a little bit more colorful, Krishna, the personality of Krishna, his temperament makes it a little bit more colorful. Then again, when I commented on the Gospels, the personality of Jesus makes it way more colorful because that's a wild story, the story of the coming of Jesus on this planet and what he did. And then when I did the Gyananda Samhita again, about 10 years ago, again we had the same problem that it's kind of tedious. The same I felt 2 months ago or 3 months ago when I did some of the last shlokas from Hatha Yoga Pradipika. I was just reading at that time about Mahamudra, Mahabandha, Mahaveda, very important techniques from the Mudra technology and from Kundalini Yoga, but there are techniques which here in Agama we don't teach to people before they have been 4 seasons in Agama, 4 seasons in Agama, which because Kundalini Yoga performed in the wrong way or approached in the wrong way, it can actually harm terribly the human beings and give exactly the opposite results to what one expects. So Kundalini Yoga is like dynamite. It has to be handled with care because otherwise it becomes from an instrument destruction, a problem. And that's why for me, I can clarify, and I love to clarify the things from Kundalini Yoga. Like we had the presentation of the first 3 mudras, Mahamudra, Mahabandha, and Mahaveda, or Mahaveda, as some people call it, and still you are not able to do it. If you want to do it with us in Agama, it takes for you to get to the Kundalini program, and it's in the end of the Kundalini program, like these are some of the most difficult ones, the most challenging ones, and therefore this may generate sometimes like, okay, Swamiji is reading to us, and all in all, some of these chapters are just an endless list of describing yoga techniques, not describing them in great detail, describing them very obliquely, in a very simplified way, and just mentioning some flabbergasting effects like this one kills death. Even about the simple Uddiyana Bandha, I think Hatha Yoga Pradipika itself, we'll see, is the next one which comes after the shlokas of today. It says Uddiyana Bandha is the lion which kills the elephant of death. Because people from India have known that in nature, the lion can kill the elephant. Usually it takes several lions to kill an elephant, because the elephant is really hard to kill. But in the end, by exhausting it for hours and hours, 2-3 elephant females, they managed to kill, 2-3 lion females, they managed to kill an elephant. So then they compare the elephant to death, like the elephant is the biggest animal on earth, and it's like, wow, you cannot kill the elephant, and then you have to kill the elephant of death, and only the lion can kill it sometimes. And what is that lion? It's Uddiyana Bandha. Then it's like, whoa. But what does it mean? I should do 320 Uddiyana Bandhas per day. Or who has the willpower, the self-discipline? And you do it for 3 months, and it's not enough because you have to do it for 12 years. And then who has the willpower to continue that? Not for 3 months, demonstrate showing your muscles like I did it for 3 months, but to do it for 12 years. So in this way, I'm trying to tell you why I myself, when resuming tonight a bit of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, tonight we have a very exciting technique and very scary and very different, which is Kechari Mudra, and which is not being taught in Agama. It's the only one of the 10 big mudras which we don't teach directly here in Agama for reasons which will appear obvious. And then generally teaching such things, especially this chapter about mudras, and a little bit when it came to pranayamas and even asanas, they were a little bit tedious. Therefore, don't let yourself get turned off or scared by this fact that technical texts of yoga, they are sometimes a long list of description of techniques, because they needed to do that. That's the way in which they needed to leave yoga to the next generations. And the fact that today we do the Paschimottanasana, or we do the Anuloma Viloma Pranayama, or we do the Mahamudra, Mahabandha, Mahaveda, we do it precisely because these people wrote these things, tedious as they are. So these are not exciting texts, but just try instead to, and again, I will not be able to give to you the description and to say, look, Svatmarama in this text says do like this, but actually in practice people do like that, and let me demonstrate and let me show you. This is not possible in a satsang. This you get in yoga courses when teachers are teaching you directly the techniques one by one, and that's why, funnily enough, a satsang based on such a text, it's a little bit difficult because it's a little bit dry. It's a little bit like going through the motions, going through the movements there. And this being said, as I promised today, the last time we stopped at the shloka number 31, which was finishing the 3 mudras. It spoke about the 3 mudras, and it said in shloka 30 that this triad of mudras, Mahamudra, Mahabandha, Mahaveda, is to be kept very secret. It destroys old age and death. Do you know somebody who did Mahamudra and Mahabandha and Mahaveda until they stopped dying? Maybe you would say, okay, Paramahamsa Yogananda said that the guru of his guru had a guru from the Himalayas called Babaji, which is a real stupid name, because everybody is Babaji in India. Baba, every yogi is called the Baba, and the Babaji is the respectful turn of that word. And therefore, it's a very neutral name. It's, as you would say, teacher. I had a yoga teacher called the teacher. It's like, it's okay, you don't say anything. And that this Babaji was living thousands of years. So then we can say, okay, so he was doing Mahamudra, Mahaveda, maybe. We don't know. He didn't tell me. He didn't tell Yogananda. He didn't tell what exactly was his recipe for becoming physically immortal. And that's why the world of yoga, both Tibetan and Indian, is full of these urban legends. They are not quite urban in India because it's village legends, but Himalayan legends in which, again, a text like Hatha Yoga Pradipika, you can say, but did Svatmarama become immortal? Isn't he dead? Maybe he still is alive somewhere in Kedarnath or Badrinath in the Himalayas or something, and he just doesn't call himself Svatmarama anymore, not to provoke the spirits, and every 50 years he changes his name and he moves to another village or to another area, and he maybe is 2,000 years old and he wrote, these are all legends, and it's very beautiful to believe in these things because they are very empowering. But on the other hand, we don't know, and the language of the yoga text is bombastic like this. The triad of mudras destroys old age and death. It's beautiful. Who wants to give it a try? Who has the self-discipline? Because then you say, oh, but I had to go get a job because my money was finished. Okay, then you cannot destroy old age and death by doing Mahamudra like Milarepa alone 30 years in a cave in the Himalayas. No, this takes automatically a certain lifestyle, certain sacrifices. You have to go fanatically and totally into these things. So some of these texts are written by autistic people for other autistic people, you know. They are written by weirdos who lived in a cave and who are nerdish, non-social, freaks, weirdos, you know, and so on. And because again, for normal people, it's not the normal people which are fucked up. It's the yogis which are fucked up, and normal people are lovely. And for the yogis, the normal people are fucked up, and the whole society which they build is fucked up. And the yogis are the only sane people who are looking. So it's like we live in such divergent conditions with this that we concluded, anyhow, to make the long story short, we concluded with this. And in the shloka number 32, it directly turns to the Kechari Mudra, which is an outstanding, totally separate technique, a bit scary, as I said, and extreme. It took about 10 shlokas, or maybe 12 shlokas, 14 shlokas, to describe the three big mudras, like 4 shlokas per mudra. It takes here approximately more than 20 shlokas to describe Kechari Mudra alone. So much attention it gets in a text which usually uses 3, 4 lines, 10 lines maximum for describing a technique. Kechari Mudra is the one which gets big attention precisely because it is so extreme. It is so extreme that, again, I'm saying in Agama we don't do it. There have been a couple of students of Agama who decided to go to India to find some guru who would allow them to do it and to try it on themselves. And we had one of our Kundalini teachers in the old days who had practiced it for himself, and he was teaching it to whoever wanted to take like extracurricular activity, extracurricular from what Agama does. I will not teach it unless I decide to do it myself, because that's the law in yoga. You cannot transmit something which you haven't done thoroughly and you haven't obtained effects for it, because otherwise it is fake. It is an imposture. I cannot be an imposter and claim to teach you Kechari Mudra when I haven't done it, and therefore I don't have it in my aura to transmit it to you. I can very easily transmit the Mahamudra and the others because I've done them for years and I have obtained some results at least from it, if not all the results. I don't know to say if I defeated old age and death, because I look quite old and death it's yet to see, you know. So therefore, we don't make absurd statements in Agama. We like to be down to earth with these things. On the other hand, with Kechari Mudra, things are more black and white because we don't teach it. So if you want to take it as an initiation, here I'm just telling you what Hatha Yoga Pradipika and the great yogi called Svatmarama, what he says about this. And I'm going to tell you a lot of other things which are known in other yoga texts and in other yoga traditions. So in this way you have a clear picture. But the fact that I give you tonight a picture of Kechari Mudra does not mean that I'm teaching it to you in any way, simply because I don't do it myself, and therefore I can't teach these things. I can have only philosophical and intellectual conversations with you about such technologies. Says the text, turn the tongue back and insert it in the cavity of the skull, turning the gaze towards the inner space of the eyebrows. This mudra is called Kechari. Very little description, like what is the cavity of the skull? It is a very big mystery, which I challenge you to read, to Google, go on Wikipedia if you want, and so on, and find out what do they have to say about Kechari Mudra, because I don't doubt that Kechari Mudra must have come at least on the Indian Wikipedia or something, and they will tell you lots of stupid things compared to what I'm going to tell you here tonight, because there are two major ways of doing it and a lot of other things. I will just get to the point in a second. So The cavity of the skull is like what? Our skull is full of cavities, and none of them is really a cavity. And what does it refer? Where should you put your tongue? No? The easiest way which comes to mind is to put your tongue up in the vault of the palate, because up in the palate there is like a little cavity, there is like a vault there, and you fit the tongue there and it fits. And you can learn to do that, but some people say that actually that is Kechari Mudra, which is nonsense. Like none of the things which I'm reading for you here would apply even 1 per 100 from that. Like if that is Kechari Mudra, then it means that this text is written by a bombastic, megalomaniac, completely out of proportion madman who exaggerates, like it's not, it's something else, but you will see from where it comes. So it says, turn the tongue back and insert it in the cavity of the skull. Where can you insert your tongue? Turning the gaze towards the inner space of the eyebrows. This is again a mysterious thing, because always when the yogis say, look inside into your eyebrows, they mean focus on Ajna Chakra. But actually, those of you who study deeper in Agama will know, and those of you who didn't, you will know if you'll study deep enough when you reach to those technologies, that there are 2 or 3 technologies of focusing your gaze towards Ajna Chakra, out of which the earliest 2, which are known to our students in the 3rd level, 4th level, 5th level, 6th level, 7th level, they are the different Tratakas. There is something which is called Chanchari Mudra, the gesture of the bumblebee, because your eyes go like the eyes of a bee. You look cross-eyed like the big bees do. And then there is the frontal Trataka. And the Chanchari Mudra and the frontal Trataka are not actually exactly one and the same thing. But besides that, there is also the Shambhavi Mudra, where you focus to visualize something, and it's in front of your forehead here. And then those of you who get to study the Taraka Yoga, the technology of Taraka, which is a South Indian technology, they find out that there is a form of visualizing something inside the head, somewhere like behind your bone of the forehead, inside the head. You can visualize a light and some geometrical shapes and something, and that seems to be what is referred to here. So it basically says, turn the tongue back, how far back, and insert it God knows where. We'll talk about this in a second. And turn your gaze towards Ajna Chakra, or inside your skull, which is way more difficult. And this mudra is called Kechari. The word Kechari is also very provocative, because there are other mudras, very discrete mudras, especially in Kashmiri Shaivism, which are called Gochari, Bhuchari, Chidgaganachari, and so on. And they mean, Chari comes from like the same root as Chalana, it means to move, to go. And then you move somewhere. Bhuchari, Bhu is the earth element, Bhuloka, Burloka. And therefore Bhuchari means to move on earth. And when you do Bhuchari Mudra, you have it in your yoga courses, those of you who reach those levels. The Bhuchari Mudra is that you focus on a space of Ajna Chakra, and if you develop that, it results in a siddhi, which today in parapsychology is called remote viewing. That your mind can go to different places on earth, and you can be there, you can project there and see different things. And this is called in yoga Bhuchari, to move on earth, to have your mind be able to move on earth. But then there is Gochari and Dikchari and Chidgaganachari, which one of them means to move in the light, and that is in the astral body, and that is lucid dreaming with astral projection, that you are moving into the astral world. And then the Gochari, the higher one, is the one which you move in the causal world, that you move into the states of void. And finally, you have the word which is called Kechari, which is one of the highest. And Ke comes from the syllable Ka, which is related with the consciousness. It's a syllable which in Sanskrit is related with the consciousness. And Kechari means Ka Charana. It means to move in the Ka. And that means your consciousness can move. This movement of consciousness is considered by some people to be equivalent only to the Tibetan technique of Pova, or what is happening when you die, that you can move directly as consciousness, as pure consciousness. and it's a very high level, and therefore Kechari is like, oh my God. Kechari is a siddhi which comes almost automatically, almost with enlightenment. It's like you can move in God, because Ka is the nature of God. Ka is the kingdom of heaven. Ka is Atman. Ka is the matter which builds spirit, is the substance which makes up spirit, and you can move in this Ka. Therefore, you move. Ka is you say the spirit, isn't it void? Yes. Therefore, Ka is a name for the void, and therefore it means to move in the void, to move in the void of consciousness, because the consciousness is not empty. You call it void, but it doesn't mean empty. It means something very peculiar, something very different, something very special, which cannot be understood or described by the mind. And therefore, the name Kechari Mudra is already very provocative, because it means you do something with your tongue, for God's sake, and you focus in Ajna Chakra, apparently, either outside or inside. We'll make it clear, but I'm just saying that the first shloka already casts a big veil of uncertainty, and that's of course because Svatmarama did not intend to teach you Kechari Mudra in this text, that you go home and take a razor blade and slice the underside of your tongue and you can do Kechari. That was never intended. It was intended that you go and live with Svatmarama for 6 years, and then he tells you, now it's time for you to start Kechari, and then you go for 6 months into extending your tongue and doing all the things described here, and then you can do Kechari, and slowly you'll reach to that, and then you could have the results. And Guru Svatmarama is always there looking over your shoulder, so that you don't get into some strange place, or that you don't produce some accident. So let's see what are the catches of this. When I heard about Kechari, first time I read about Kechari probably in a book by Swami Shivananda, who also was of the opinion that it's a bit extreme, you shouldn't do it. Maybe if you live in a cave in the Himalayas with Babaji, he can teach you the Kechari and you should do it. I met yoga teachers or yoga students from the Haridwar Yoga University in India who said that they were taught to do Kechari, and some of them tried to do in a softer way or something. You'll see what means in a softer way, because the full version is quite amazing. And some people would do it. I remember when I spoke with Dhirendra Brahmachari, I told him, I did all the mudras from Vajroli to Mahamudra and from Shakti Chalana to Viparita Karani, but not Kechari, because my yoga teacher, with whom I had studied at that time in Romania, he was disagreeing to do. He hadn't done it himself, and he was not teaching it. And Dhirendra Brahmachari, he didn't tell, look, I did it, I can teach you, or you can do it. He said, listen, if it is written in the Shastras, these are the Shastras, Hatha Yoga, Pradipika and others like it, then it's there to be done. It's not impossible for human beings. It's not too much. And therefore, if you believe in the Shastras and if you believe in the yoga tradition, you find somebody to teach you to do the Kechari and you do it. I have been too much caught up in my things, or too lazy or something to do Kechari. I doubt if now at the age of 61 I will try to find somebody to teach me Kechari and to do Kechari, because I still have a lot on my plate, and therefore I can do yoga without Kechari, and Swami Shivananda says exactly the same. And I remember I've seen a translation of Hatha Yoga Pradipika made by Swami Vishnu Devananda, who was one of the near disciples of Swami Shivananda. He is the one who created the famous Shivananda Yoga in Canada and in the Western countries. And he also, in his book, when he gets to this, he says, don't do it. Don't try it. It's not something which you want to do. Like, this is a bit of an extreme practice. Some of you may be extreme. The promise of Kechari Mudra is that it can give you the whole of yoga quickly by this extreme practice. Like, you risk, it could be a dangerous practice. On the other hand, if you succeed, it's like easy yoga. It's not that easy after all, but it's easy yoga in the meaning that people who do yoga, they said, Swamiji, I have done the first 13 levels of yoga in your school, or 14, and that's the practitioner yoga, then or the apprentice yoga, and then we have to do another 10 levels, which is the practitioner yoga, and when we get to level 24, that's when we can do Kundalini, and even in Kundalini you don't teach us Kechari, and so on. Like, it takes a long time. We know this, and that's the way Agama is. If you want to study full-on yoga, it takes years, because yoga is not something which you can study in 3 weeks. No, it's too big. And some of the things which you do, you have to feel them, you have to experience them, you have to adapt to them, and there is a sort of psychological integration which comes from some of those things. And therefore, you all know, especially those who are here with me in the room, as well as many of those who are listening to me online, you all know that yoga is a gradual process. And in Agama, we think it takes maybe 10 years to teach you yoga. It's a process which takes definitely years to teach you. And then afterwards, still 10 years is not too much. It takes 10 years to teach you medical science. And then even when you are a doctor, you have to read and keep up with the latest research and everything, because constantly the medical science progresses. And it's the same with yoga. The fact that you have done 6 years of yoga doesn't mean you are already at the level of Milarepa or at the level of Ramakrishna. And that's why, of course, yoga is a big process of development. Coming back to our story, to our text, therefore, it describes a very exceptional technique which has ups and downs. And I'm telling you directly, the up of it is that it's very spectacular. It seems to be very rapid, which it isn't, because I know people who practiced it and it didn't give them very quick results, not at all almost. And so they believed like, whoa, this is a miracle, panaceum, it will do miracles. It didn't do miracles. It still took hard work to do. And the upside of it is that people believe, I don't want to do a lot of yoga. I want to do one thing. Like people say, I want to do the Hridaya technique, the Who Am I? Some people say, I want to do the Kriya Yoga technique of Yogananda, 5 hours every day. I want to do. Some people are like this. I wouldn't dare to offend them by telling them that they are obsessive compulsive, but a psychologist would say that's the obsessive compulsive temperament, where people say in Agama you teach approximately 160 yoga techniques, and my biggest difficulty is to choose which one of them to do today. And then you consult with your teacher, you consult, and make a program, make a tapas for the next 3 months, and then you choose to do something. And people are always split because there are too many yoga techniques, and you can't do them in 24 hours every day, and you always have to sacrifice some of them and to choose others, depending on what your personal purposes are at that moment. Some people say, I would prefer to have one thing. If there would be one thing to do. If there is one thing to do in Orthodox Christianity, that's the prayer of the heart. You just take the prayer of the heart and you do it 12 hours per day, if you can. If not, you do it 40 minutes per day, whatever. It depends how strong your knees and stomach is. You do it as long as you can. In the same way, Kriya Yoga. Yogananda said that he had times when he did Kriya Yoga 8 hours per day. Try, if any one of you want, get the initiation in Kriya Yoga and try to do it for 3 hours non-stop. See, you'll get a headache, you'll feel nausea, you'll feel bored, you'll feel that you want to go out and walk through the forest. You'll feel other, so therefore nothing is easy in this way, but there are people who have this temperament. I want to do one thing. Don't bother me to choose between 5 things to do, because I have no discrimination or something. I am an obsessive compulsive type. I want to do one thing from morning till evening. Then there are such lineages in yoga, such methodologies in yoga, and Kechari Mudra can be one of them. I think Swami Shivananda called it with a very funny name, Amanaska Yoga or something. It's not Amanaska, Amanaska is something else, but something like that. He wrote a book called the Gita of Yoga, Yoga Gita, Ananda Gita is the title of his book. And then he says there is this Amanaska Yoga and so on. It consists solely in one thing. You practice Kechari Mudra. There is a yoga of only Kechari Mudra. You don't need the other 9 mudras from Kundalini Yoga. You don't need asanas. You don't need pranayamas. You just do Kechari Mudra, exactly as some people just do the prayer of the heart, exactly as some people just do Kriya Yoga, or other methods which contain a mono technique, a single technique, which is done there. As I said 100 times, my temperament is Mercurian, and because of this, I'm getting bored to do one and the same thing all day long, exactly as like I like French fries, but if you would give me French fries for 3 months, morning, afternoon, and evening, you would drive me crazy. No, I am the kind of person who likes diversity. And therefore in yoga, I like diversity. I like to do 20 different yoga techniques. So when I get bored of one, I jumped into another one. And in this way, I can satisfy this part of my psychology. And thus, with Kechari Mudra, there are ups that, hey, you want yoga made of one technique? That's called Kechari Mudra. Boom. Other people say, but is the meditation with Aum? Yes, the meditation with Aum. You want the yoga of Aum. There is the Taraka Yoga also, which is a visual meditation. As I said, there is the Kriya Yoga, where there is a technique of Kriya, and this technique of Kriya, it gets updated a little bit. Like many people heard that the Kriya Yoga of Yogananda is actually the technique of Kriya has 6 levels. And after you do it for a couple of years or something, your guru can give you level 2 of Kriya, and so on and so forth. And actually everybody who has known the level 2 or 3 or something, they are just small variations of level 1. It's nothing essentially different. It's just a little bit upgraded, and then it goes into Shambhavi Mudra in the end, the real Shambhavi Mudra, the full-on Shambhavi Mudra. But again, some people love this thing. I do one thing, and when I wake up, it's like I say, did you do your prayer of the heart? Today, it's evening time. How much prayer of the heart did I do today? If I didn't do prayer of the heart, I'm not a good monk or not a good nun because I have ignored my prayer. My mission is to do prayer of the heart hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours every day. This is a certain temperament. People who have this kind of temperament. So Kechari fits to these people. That's why sometimes these obsessive compulsive people take it, and it gives the impression it's easy and quick, which in a certain way it is, but you will see that it involves certain bizarre sacrifices. The downside of it is that it's a technique which involves a certain degree of self-mutilation, like you have to cut parts of your body, and so it's bloody. It's not a direct thing, exactly like you would perform circumcision on a young child or something, It involves some blood and cutting, and it's a technique which involves some physical difficulties, as you will see. So, therefore, some people stay away from it. I, myself, when talking about it, let's read a few more shlokas so it's more clear so I don't surprise you. 33. So it said you should insert the tongue somewhere in a cavity. What's a cavity of the skull? It could be the vault of the palace, which it isn't, by the way, to make it clear. And you focus your gaze towards the eyebrows, but we don't know if it's out here or in there, how much in the area of the eyebrows, where exactly, because the direction is different. Then 33 says, the tongue must be first elongated. So before you do this, wait a second, you have a foreplay. And that foreplay takes minimum 6 months. And it must be elongated by cutting gradually under it, milking it, and moving it in all directions until it touches the space between the eyebrows. A tongue which touches this is the space between the eyebrows. A tongue, take out your tongue and try to see how many centimeters you meet before you can put it here. That's about this much, yeah? That's about 8 to 10 centimeters to elongate it. A tongue which is 8 to 10 centimeters longer than it is now won't even fit in your mouth anymore. No, it would be a tongue so big that you are wondering what you do with it. That's, of course, a misinformation because it's not meant this way. the space between the eyebrows is actually inside. What they mean, and I'm going to get into details of it, is that the tongue, if it is free enough to go back, it reaches the uvula. You all know what the uvula is, this thing which is hanging where you tickle to do Vamana Daute. This thing is called the uvula in English, this hanging thing. And behind that, that uvula is part of what is called the soft palate. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please go on Wikipedia or some other place and study the anatomy of your head. See a cross section through your head and see exactly what you have there. There is a hard part of the palate where you have bone up till somewhere in the middle here, and then in the back part, your palate does not have bone in it, it's just flesh. And that's called the soft palate. And the soft palate, when you inhale in a certain way, it vibrates and it makes... And that's why people snore. When people breathe in a certain way, your palate, your soft palate, does like this. And that's what the snoring is, either when you inhale or you exhale. And that soft palate, you can push it a little bit, you can bend it because it's made of flesh. And therefore it's much more alive. The hard palate, you can't do anything because there is bone inside it, behind it, and therefore that's rigid. But the soft palate can be abused a little bit. And when you go behind that soft palate, there you find the nasal polyps, and then above them it's the opening of the nostrils. The two nostrils are opening inside somewhere above the mouth, above the soft palate. And then there is a hollow above it, and it comes back, and as it comes back on the back side of your throat, there is the pharynx. It's called the pharynx, and lower than it, when it gets down here, it's the larynx. So you can have pharyngitis and laryngitis, the two forms of infection when you get a flu, that sometimes you are inflamed behind your nose, and it's like you can't breathe, and it's swollen there, and it's very uncomfortable. And sometimes you are inflamed in your throat, and then there is a lot of mucus and stuff which comes down here. Please study the anatomy. This is really, you really need to know the anatomy of that place. So, this, when it says that your tongue touches the space between the eyebrows, it's not like a snake or a lizard from outside like this, because there is no point of your tongue going here. My guru from India, who had done this technique, when I asked him about it, he showed me that actually the measure which was that your tongue should reach the tip of your nose. Even here there is huge differences, because I've seen people with a nose like this, and then it's easy to touch the tip of the nose. And I've seen people like me with a nose like this, with an Asian type of nose, and then to touch it is much more difficult. If this corresponds to differences in the anatomy inside, it's very possible. So it's possible that a person who has a nose like this would need to extend the tongue even more. So basically, when you want to try, if you can do this full on, you try to bring your tongue and see how much you lack until you can touch the tip of your own nose. This much I lack, about 2.5 centimeters. Svatmarama says, if you want to be able to put the tongue inside that space, inside, up there, behind the uvula, then, where the nostrils are opening, then you have to be able to have it as long as that. Can you extend the tongue? Exactly like the penis in Tantra. If you pull it and milk it and milk it, there is an Arabic African technique called jelk. Of course, all these techniques work much better until you are 25 years old, because until you are 25 years old, sorry to disappoint you, it's based on the fact that your body produces growth hormone, and you are still growing. And after 25, your body stops producing growth hormone, and the only way to get growth hormone is to get it from milk. The best would be women's milk, and you can get it from cow's milk as well if it is unpasteurized and fresh cow's milk. And other milks, goat milk as well, and so on. Milk, mother's milk, animal mother and human mother, is the only one which contains growth hormone. Yeah? Otherwise, you have to take growth hormone as a medicine, and that's very controversial. You usually cannot take it as a pill because it gets destroyed in the stomach, which is very meaningful, because that's what they say about soma, that soma gets destroyed in the stomach, and therefore you have to get it injectable. And when you get to inject medicine, hormones, and so on in your body, then already you are far from Mother Nature. So basically these plastic things in the body, like extending the size of your penis or extending the size of your tongue, is best done until you are 25. As a child or as a teenager, it works best. In Africa, the Sudanese Arab communities, when they want to extend the penis of their boys so that they should have some really big tools when they are grown-up men, they do it when the boys are 11, 12, 13. That's when they start jelqing them. They basically milk their penis a lot without letting them ejaculate. They simply milk and pull, and they use butter and so on. And when you are 12 years old and they milk your penis, then it will grow into a humongous penis, you know. But when you are 45 years old, you can still milk your penis, but if you don't take growth hormone, at least to drink a lot of cow milk, fresh, it will not grow because your body is not in the condition to grow tissues too much anymore. It can, but you have to be very stubborn, pull extremely hard. There's a lot of stuff there. I don't have time. So it's the same with the tongue. You have to extend your tongue. This is already a limiting factor. To extend the tongue, it says you have to milk it. How do you milk it? First of all, it sounds a bit disgusting and unpleasant. How clean should your hands be when you milk your own tongue? Second thing is that, of course, the tongue is slippery and you cannot really milk it. Therefore, to milk it, you have to hold it either with a handkerchief. And remember, some yogi living in Gangotri in the Himalayas, how many clean handkerchiefs does he have when he lives in a cave out in the Himalayas? No, it's like it will be a piece of cloth which you reuse, and it gets very filthy and very dirty, and you don't want to think about the hygienical conditions. So you catch it with a piece of cloth, linen or cotton, and you pull it, so you have grip, because otherwise you can't grip it. Or some yogis from India were using directly metal instruments like a gynecological forceps, by which you catch the head of the babies when they come out of the mother to extract them more quickly, more easily. Everybody knows many kids got damaged by the forceps of the gynecologist. It's a very dangerous practice. And therefore, what if you damage your tongue? What if it hurts? What it does? Yeah? And therefore, extending your tongue is not a joke. I have seen men and women born already with a very long and big tongue, and occasionally on internet you can see photos of such people. Such people are blessed. They have a karma. They don't know how to use it, but they could. Maybe they have the tongue already long enough for performing directly Kechari Mudra. Not only it says that you have to elongate it, and it says you have to milk it, you have to move it in all the directions, like you have to pull it left and right and up and down to make it, to simply stimulate the root of the tongue to grow. And also it says by cutting gradually. Cutting gradually, it means that not only that the tongue should be long enough, but when you want to curl it back, to do it like this, back, then there is something under the tongue which holds it. That something is a membrane. It's a completely, apparently useless tissue, which actually in nature, it has the usefulness that we should not swallow our own tongue. The people who don't have it or who have it too loose, sometimes in special accidents, when they are drowning or something, they can swallow their own tongue and suffocate on their own tongue. And therefore, Mother Nature has prevented that by creating a frenum, a membrane under the tongue, which contains no vital organs. You just have to be careful that somewhere near that membrane, there are 1 or 2 blood vessels. I know alternative healers who claim that in those blood vessels you accumulate a lot of the toxic blood related to your liver, and actually they heal people of cancer in the liver and something by cutting those blood vessels. They take a sharp surgical knife blade and they find those blood vessels and they simply chip them. And out of them there comes a black blood, like really toxic blood, is stored for some mysterious reason. This is things which official medicine does no shit about, and nobody bothers to research. Why does there come a very rotten colored blood, especially in sick people, when you cut under the tongue? Normally the blood theoretically circulates evenly and it should be the same in the whole body, but it isn't. Natural therapists, and if you find some people who had these blood vessels chipped, cut like this, they will tell you what came from under their tongue. No, and apparently that's where we accumulate heavy metals, toxins, and a lot of things come from there. So it's a big story. No? And of course, this text doesn't say you should cut those blood vessels. It's not about cutting under the tongue therapy. It's about just cutting the frenum. I have a friend who is very, very, very advanced in yoga and who heard about this, and eventually, being a very voluntary person, a very bold type of person, he simply said, you know what? In modern times, it's not like in India in the old days that you could get infected and cut too much. Or, you know, it's like we have oral surgery. We have dentists who can do anything in your mouth. There are surgeons who do oral surgery. And if you just come and tell them, cut this useless membrane, they can do it with anesthesia. They can stem the blood flow. There will not be so much blood. And definitely they will not by mistake cut your blood vessels. And therefore they can do it clean and efficient. And he did. He had a student, one of his own students in yoga, who was an oral surgeon and a dentist. And he simply said, won't you do this on me? And the guy said, surely, gladly. You know, it's like, it's an experiment for me as well. And he gave him anesthesia, cut that thing, and so on. So then he could do some, he didn't have the tongue long enough, but he could do still, because this frenum being cut, it allows you to flip the tongue much more back, and you gain a lot of centimeters in this process. And I told him, so what did you get out of it? Again, I'm talking about a person who did tons of yoga. Yeah, I don't want to say who it is or what, but it's because they have their privacy. But it's a person who did tons of yoga. No? And he said the only visible thing which I had is that the tip of my tongue became numb. I couldn't feel anything. So in this process, some nerve got damaged. Although that guy was a dentist and a professional surgeon, we don't know everything about all the details of it. So he said, I lost sensitivity on the tip of my tongue. And for the rest, I didn't notice much. So therefore, we always are double-edged with this Kechari Mudra. It's a big thing. Some yogis did it. I've seen my Indian guru that he could do it. I've known people who could do it. I've known some people who had extremely long tongues and they could do it anyway without cutting. I've talked with professors in the Haridwar University who they told me their opinion, their way of dealing with it. And therefore I know a lot of things about this technology of Kechari Mudra. But I also know that sometimes some people did not get the full promised results from it. So, shloka number 33 says the tongue must be first elongated by cutting gradually under. Actually, you don't elongate it if you cut under, but you release it more from the root, and then it can flip more from the root and you gain a number of centimeters. So it behaves as if your tongue became longer, while it actually doesn't become longer. But by milking it, which will make it longer, and moving it in all directions, which means just pulling it to loosen it, until it touches the space between the eyebrows, not outside. Svatmarama is an asshole because he doesn't say it clearly, you know. But that's how they are. They don't want to tell you the secrets of it. They just write for them and for their students to remember. It's a memento. It's not something by which you are meant to learn it from the book without the guru. They don't want to give the secret. So it's touching between the eyebrows. Imagine a point inside your head, behind your nose, a little bit above the opening of the nostrils. The nostrils are opening inside your pharyngeal cavity. As I said there, that cavity, here are the nostrils opening, and it goes on a bit up, like the palate, but another, it's a second one higher behind, yeah? And it goes up and then down on the back wall of the pharynx. When you eat ice cream or something, that part becomes very cold. Or if you inhale cold air in the winter, that part starts hurting. It becomes like when you drink fruit shakes here in Thailand, sometimes, oh, you get a pain because it's too cold on the back wall of the throat, either the lower part, the larynx, or the higher part, the pharynx, which is behind the uvula and behind the nostrils. Again, study the anatomy of the head to understand very well what I said. 34. With a sharp, clean blade like the leaf of milk hedge. That's a plant. They usually use the Sanskrit name of it. Milk hedge is the English translation of it. So it's just like a blade, a razor, a very fine blade. Remember, 500 years ago, technology was very primitive. Blades were made by, if people had a knife, I don't know if you have seen knives from 200 years ago. They were very primitive, except in Japan or some places like this where they used samurai technology. Now, otherwise, the blacksmithery was, no, knives were rusting and thick and uneven and like this, you know. It was not very easy to make. Today, you have knives made on high precision machinery and surgical knives and so on. So with a sharp, clean blade, so something as delicate and as nice and clean as possible, like the leaf of milk hedge, of course, very clean. You have to disinfect it regularly. Gently cut the membrane to a hair's breadth at a time. A hair's breadth. A hair's breadth is less than 1/10 of a millimeter. No, a hair is not thicker than 1/10 of a millimeter. And therefore, you cut just enormously little. It will not hurt, at least not too much. It will be like a mosquito sting, no? And how much blood will come out of that? Not too much. Therefore, the method is not really outrageous, but still it's like, okay, I'm going to cut my, what if I don't? Maybe you can do it for me and I can do it for you, you know? Like it's a lot of stuff in it. 35. Then rub in a healing mixture of rock salt and turmeric, or another text commented by Brahmananda, the commentator of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, recommends also yellow mirobalan. There are in India, triphala, 3 fruits which are called mirobalan, and one of them very aromatic. They are like cinnamon or something. Cinnamon is not one of them. And one of them is called the yellow mirobalan, widely available. Turmeric is also widely available. It's not secret substances. And basically, they used rock salt and turmeric, rubbing it on the area which you cut so that it doesn't get infected and so that it doesn't heal in the wrong way. And then it says, after 7 days, one can cut again to a hair's breadth. So every 7 days, you cut a little. You wait for it to heal for 1 week, then you cut a little bit more. And like this, with the patience of a Chinese old man, in 6 months, you will get somewhere. You will cut 1-2 centimeters out of that part of your tongue. Again, one of my friends did it quickly. She said, I don't stay 6 months. I get to an oral surgeon. He can do it in half an hour, for God's sake. You know, he did. He did not notice surprising, shockingly beneficial results from it, with one little negative result, that the part of his tongue, the tip of his tongue, got numb, which meant that some nerve ending was afflicted in the process. So, as you can see, the method is... Now, are there alternatives to this? Not really. When I talked to somebody who studied yoga in Hindi in the Haridwar University, in the Haridwar University there is a department of yoga, and there they try to make it as academic as possible. There they told them that they found yogis who simply said if you rub it with salt, it's a bit painful, it will get irritated, and then the flesh will withdraw. So instead of cutting, you don't need the blade. Every day, 2 times per day, you take rock salt on your fingers, go under your tongue and rub that membrane until it's a little bit painful and uncomfortable. A lot of salt. Don't swallow it. Then, of course, when the saliva is coming, just spit it, rinse your mouth and all that. And the salt will make the flesh go back. so it will diminish the frenum. So instead of cutting it, you just wear it out with salt. That's an alternative. Just I want to tell you the full picture. If any ones of you are trying to have wild thoughts about Kechari Mudra, because it is a very promising technique, but you have to know all the ins and outs of it. 36. Operate in this same way regularly for 6 months, like every 1 week go forward. In the end of those 6 months, the membrane that binds at the root of the tongue is severed. So the point is to finish off that membrane, because you want the tongue to be free. But then you can say, what about the danger that I swallow my tongue accidentally? Well, it's a risk which you take. Mother Nature has put that membrane so you don't swallow your tongue. If you swallow accidentally, tough luck. Therefore, many people have said this method is dangerous. I would like now at this point, before telling you what it is, to tell you the two stories which have been defining for me in this understanding of Kechari Mudra, besides what I was reading from the books of Swami Shivananda and a few other yogis. When I asked my Romanian yoga teacher in those days why he was not teaching the Kechari Mudra, he gave me the example of a fellow who, those were the communist times. No, it was the old days of the communism, and people were practicing yoga in very private ways. There was not too much official schools of yoga and stuff like this, because communism was not enjoying the mystical aspects of yoga, the religious and spiritual parts of yoga. And to make the long story short, one guy who was one of these famous yogis, he was found dead in a forest near Bucharest, sitting in the lotus posture, straight up, no, and not breathing and so on. And the people in the inner circles who knew something about it, they said that he had done Kechari Mudra, and he stopped breathing, and he left his body, and therefore it was like either a suicide or a yoga suicide or some accident happening from yoga. And this guy who was my yoga teacher in the day, he said, I don't want neither I or you to risk the same thing. So I'm not teaching such a technique to my students. As I told, when I said that to Dhirendra Brahmachari, Dhirendra Brahmachari said, then why do you think they put it in the Shastras? They didn't put it in the Shastras so you should be afraid of it. They put it in the Shastras so that it can be practiced. So, and the second story, I read it a bit later, is a story, there's a booklet on yoga written by Swami Abhedananda. Swami Abhedananda was one of the disciples of Ramakrishna. And Swami Abhedananda, he tells a story, he talks about Vedanta and so on, but in the first chapter, he wrote a brochure, a booklet, not very long. I forgot the name of the book, but if there is only one book written by Swami Abhedananda, you will find it. And in that he says, how did he become interested in yoga? Like, why was he looking for yogis and for gurus? Why was he looking for yoga? Because he saw the following scene when he was a child. He said, when I was 6 or 7 years old, in the village where I lived, somewhere in Bengal, in the eastern corner of India, when I was a kid, in the jungle there in Bengal, which is like this jungle here, they found a yogi. That yogi was not moving, apparently not breathing. He was sitting in a meditation position, and apparently he had sat so long, not only that birds had nested on him and he had grown moss on his shoulders and in his hair, but there was even a tree which had grown between his calf and his ankle. Like as he was sitting like this, some seed of a tree had fallen in there, and it had grown, not destroying his leg, just in the space between it had pushed its way, and he had a tree grown here in the lotus pose. He was like this, and here he had a tree sticking out of his legs and growing parallel to his body like this. And from the size of the tree, they could see that he had been there for at least 6 or 7 years without moving. Like he was like a statue. No pee-pee, no caca, no nothing, no movement. He was gone. But he didn't look dead. He was not rotting. He was not mummified. He looked alive. So the only way they could get him, because they wanted to get him to the court of the local king, of the Raja, the only way they could get him was to cut the tree. So they had to cut the tree above and below, no? And so then they put him on a platform and they carried him in the lotus pose like this, sitting in meditation, to the court of the king. And at the court of the king had an Ayurvedic doctor. And the Ayurvedic doctors, they are hand in hand with yoga. They know a lot of things about yoga, and yoga knows a lot of things about Ayurveda. So this guy knew immediately that this guy could not stay like this in suspended animation with his heart basically stopped without doing Kechari Mudra. So he knew immediately this is a guy who forgot himself doing Kechari Mudra, and like, when will he remember and come back? And no, maybe never. So he said, we have to find out what the story is. So he opened his mouth with a metallic instrument, gently, not to destroy his teeth, and he stuck his finger inside and pulled the tongue out, because his tongue was curled like this back. And he simply, all you have to do is just pull it out. Not a few seconds have passed since he pulled the tongue out, that this guy's eyes shivered, shuddered. There was a sign of life. And he drew breath after a few more seconds. And then after approximately 30 seconds, that was in front of the king, in front of the Ayurveda, in front of the village. No? And after a few minutes, after 30 seconds or so, he opened his eyes. Suddenly, a man who was like a ghost, And the problem was that as soon as he opened his eyes, everybody could notice that he was displeased. Like he was angry, he was pissed off. And these people come from such states of consciousness that you don't want them to be pissed off, because if they say, may you be reborn as a rat, then in the next life you will be reborn as a rat. If they get angry at you, they can do whatever they want, because they come from Ajna Sahasrara, and there is no limit to the mental power which they can manifest. So nobody wants to piss off this kind of people, And he opened his eyes, he was displeased, angry even. And eventually when he managed to say a word, he said, who woke me up? Everybody fell on their belly, everybody kneeled down and got flat to the ground. And some of them told him, Babaji, please excuse us. We didn't know we're disturbing you. We thought maybe you are sick or dead or something. We found you in the forest with a tree grown like this. We didn't know. It's like we thought that we were helping you, and that we were like, please don't get angry at us, because nobody disturbed you on purpose. No, we just were confused and we don't know what this is. At which he had enough control of himself he was not an egoistic man. He was displeased, but so what? He basically said, shit happens, or if you want, this is how life is. So he said, how powerful the karma is, that even when I am in my high states, some karma has to determine some idiots to find me and wake me up, from my high states of meditation. He said, stop disturbing me. I'm perfectly okay. I'm in my yoga thing and so on. Just leave me alone. No, I don't want to be with you. I don't want to talk to you. I have no story to tell you. I'm not interested to be with you on this planet. I have a project of my own. Fuck off and leave me alone. No? And then he said, okay, this time I'm going to leave my body. Like he had so much power acquired from these years of meditation that he could actually decide to completely die and to break the connection with the body. So he closed his eyes again and he died. His heart stopped beating. Probably he swallowed his tongue back or whatever, and he did that. These are wild stories, and you can hear more in the yoga world about people who have seen Kechari Mudra, have heard about it. It's not a joke. It's a very, very big technique. And actually the yogis themselves don't know that there are 2 degrees of doing it. I read about people who talk about this. I've seen even some video or something on YouTube. They were talking complete nonsense. It shows how ignorant they have become. They said you do Kechari Mudra and you put your tongue back, and then with the tip of the tongue you can plug the left nostril or the back right nostril from the back. And then you can do Anuloma Viloma, the Nadishodhana Pranayama, by with your tongue. Like from outside you look like this, and actually it's bullshit. Why wouldn't you use your fingers? Why would you go to the length of chopping your tongue to do that, if it's just for breathing alternatively? It's not. They don't know what is what. And there are two applications to this Kechari Mudra, which Svatmarama does not describe. He speaks only about one of them, because he says the tongue should be put in a certain cavity. I will tell you immediately what that cavity actually is. And it's not the nostrils or some nonsense like this. The yogis have found out that if the tongue is really loose, it can be swallowed in the throat. So it's not curled and up, it's curled and down. And then it presses a point on the epiglottis. That is the cartilage which separates the breathing channel from the food channel. When you eat, the epiglottis goes like this, and the food is not going in your lungs, it's going in your stomach. So under that epiglottis is the entrance to the trachea, to the lungs. It appears that when that epiglottis is touched by the tip of the tongue which comes from above, then it produces an acupuncture-like effect. It produces an electric circuit of some sort, which stops your breath. The yogis have noticed it in frogs. They say that frogs do the same thing in the winter in India. I don't know exactly which frogs, because there are 20 types of frogs. And that the frogs, when they want to hibernate the whole winter, they swallow their tongue, and then they stop breathing. And the body miraculously doesn't need oxygen, it goes in a state which is a complete miracle for modern medicine. Of course, you would say, if they are interested, if they want to send people on Mars, and if people have to travel for 9 years until they get to Mars, won't it be easy that all of them do Kechari Mudra and they are in hibernation state? No, it's not that these things are not practical or not interesting. They are even worth of science fiction and so on. But the yogis actually said it does happen, it can be done. And by imitating the frogs, they said that there is a nadi, there is an energy channel here in the epiglottis, in the throat, which they call kurma nadi. And that by touching with the tongue this kurma nadi, you close the circuit like when you do a mudra with your fingers, and then it starts automatically. In a matter of seconds and minutes, your breath stops, and you don't breathe, and you don't die. But of course, the question is, how will you take the tongue out? You need to have a sort of a leftover of control so that you can pull it out. Or you have to have a friend to whom you tell, look, in 2 hours, get my tongue out. No, I have to go to take care of my children or something. Like I have some job to attend. It's like I cannot stay here with swallowing the tongue. This is the hibernation Kechari Mudra, the one which is, for example, there is a translation of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika made by Pancham Singh in 1905. And this guy, when he talks about Kechari Mudra, he knows what he knew from other yogis. And he said, how do you swallow the tongue? And they said it goes in your gullet. In your gullet means like in the throat. It's a primitive name, primitive English name for the throat. So you put it here. But that's not what Svatmarama says. Svatmarama says there is a cavity in your skull. That's up here, not down there. So there are two typologies of Kechari Mudra. One which is simply creating a trance where you don't breathe and your heart stops. And that is used by some yogis to stop their breath and to stop their heartbeats. And there are many experiments which showed it possible. In the 1970s, there was a yogi Kudra from Mauritius or Réunion, I forgot, one of these French islands in the Indian Ocean, which are full of Hindu minorities. And this guy was a yogi inspired from India. His guru who had been Indian or whatever. And he was able to stop his breath for half an hour up to 2 hours. And they put him in a box made of glass. And they even put him under the water in a swimming pool. And he was sitting crouched like this in a box, not breathing for half an hour minimum, sometimes more. He did it even for 2 hours. And there are films. You probably find him on YouTube. Yogi Kudra. I don't know if he's still alive or he was doing this in the 1970s. And he was filmed in an American documentary called That's Incredible, where they were presenting all sorts of incredible. They invited him in America and they put him in a swimming pool in the studio there. They put just to make sure that he was not cheating. Other yogis have been found to do the same thing. Thérèse Brosse, a French medical doctor, she did research on stopping of the breath in Lonavla, in the yoga hospital of Swami Kuvalayananda, and they found yogis who could stop their breath and heart for incredibly long periods of time. One of those yogis was invited by the Rockefeller Institute in New York to do his stunt in New York. And they dug a hole in the ground in front of the building, the Rockefeller Institute. They put him in that with sensors on his skin, like he was measured the blood pressure, he was measured the pulse and everything all the time, permanently. He was connected with electrodes. Then they covered him with earth. They buried him basically. And he had to stop his breath. And he stopped his breath for 7 days. He stayed 7 days buried in the yard of the Rockefeller Institute with guards on top, so that they make sure nobody came in the night and gave him some oxygen balloon or something, you know. Like they were really paranoid that this must be some cheating. Because medically, there is no explanation. Medically, they say that if your brain doesn't get oxygen for 5 minutes, your brain dies. And how these people could stay 7 years without breathing and heart beating, and they didn't get older even, they stayed young, and there was no metabolism. It was called suspended animation, that the animation of the body is suspended. It's like you freeze it, and it stays like this. It's not explicable. This is a miracle. And that's why, according to the wall of silence, Kechari Mudra is almost impossible to show to the world, because once you show it, you could, if you reach one of these forms, you could demonstrate the fact that you can stop your heart and your heartbeats for 2 days. And that will rock the medical science completely. It's not possible. They will still believe that you are cheating in some way, and it's a lie. And other people say, now come to our institute, we also want to check. We think that the other guys didn't measure it right, and maybe you cheated on them. And they are just going to make you in a ping pong ball like this and move you from 10 institutes, from 10 countries, from each, so because each one of them will want, and in the end they still won't have an explanation. And they will say, okay, but it's just you. You are a freak. You probably have some lizard DNA in you, or some frog DNA in your blood. But the other people cannot do this. No? And in this way, the medical science will wash their hands. And anyhow, the wall of the silence will not be breached, that somebody comes on television and says, we found a yogi doing Kechari Mudra, and we have learned a very important fact that people can live, stop their heartbeat, stop their breath for years if necessary, and all that, you know. So that's why with this Kechari Mudra, you are at the limit of the incredible. You are at the edge of the incredible. And remember that some people believe that the tongue goes down, but it should go up. Where up? I'm not going to keep you for long. I'm just going to tell you anatomically. The human skull has 4 sinuses. Sinuses. Sinuses means that the bones of your skull are not completely rigid. They are hollow. In the bones of your skull, here and there are small spaces, like pores. Pores in the bone. The bone, if you'd cut the bone for a dead person, you would see that the bone was empty inside. But not like these bones which have marrow inside. These ones are empty, but inside there is nothing. And some radiesthesists, some radionics people, they believe that it's because some resonance and some of the telepathy and mental powers are exactly resonance of these cavities, that these cavities are resonating with electromagnetic waves or sonorous waves or something, and they produce resonance, and that they are boxes of resonance like antennas or something. It's not clear, it's not researched scientifically, but basically the main known sinuses are that there are two sinuses here on the cheeks, the cheek sinuses, which are involved in dentistry. When dentists drill too hard in your upper teeth, they can get in your sinuses. So there are in these bones, and there is a sinus here, and most people who have sinusitis, they get an infection here, and if you get pus or shit coming out of your nose, it's coming from this sinus. It's in this forehead bone. The forehead bone is not one layer. It's like it's two layers. There is a bag of air in the middle of it, and that's a sinus. And then there is another sinus which we never get to see or know about, which is in the bone behind the nose, in the top of the pharynx. At the top, it's called nasopharynx, from nose and pharynx, and that is a hole, and basically it's in the bone which separates your nose from your brain. When you go beyond that bone, it's in the middle of your head, it's somewhere here like this. And when you go beyond that bone, you go directly into the brain. And actually it's not the brain only which is there. Exactly on top of it, there is the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland, which Ayurveda calls the gland of destiny. And there is the clock of the being, the Ham Granthi. It's the Ajna chakra gland, the pineal and the pituitary. The pituitary for Ajna, the pineal for Sahasrara. Sometimes it's not clear how the division is made, because the pineal gland reacts to light like Ajna chakra or something. Anyhow, I'll not go deep into this. There's no time. But basically you have the nose, the behind the nose, the bone. In that bone there is a bag, an empty space, and behind that bone you have the pituitary gland. And it is basically believed, the whole thing which you hear here, it's basically understood this, that by touching the tongue on the opening of that sphenoid, it's called the sphenoid sinus, this third sinus, the internal one, which again you will never see it, only if you put a probe behind your nose and up there, and to the back wall, not to the front wall. It has nothing to do with the nostrils seen from the back. It's exactly on the opposite side, on the back wall of the nose pharynx, and there is a small hole, because these sinuses, they communicate with the outside. And in the back wall, there is a tiny microscopic little hole, and that goes to a bag which has nothing. And behind that bag, during another layer of bone, is your pituitary gland. And your pituitary gland produces secretions which can change completely the clock of your body. And that's why and it's supposed that when you put the tongue there, so not back here, but back there on the back wall, you somehow stimulate, like an acupuncture point, which is very sensitive because it's right in there where you never get to touch it. It stimulates your pituitary gland. And your pituitary gland gets unleashed quickly, and it starts producing things that you never knew were possible in your brain or in your body. So there is a biochemistry which is miraculous, and in India they call that soma, and they simply called it the fluid of immortality. Those liquids, some of them can heal you, can rejuvenate you, can make you live long, and many people say, well, then it's worth it to try Kechari Mudra. Maybe. That's why I say it depends from where you are. So it says, then turning back the tongue, 37, turning back the tongue, one shall make it touch the triple junction. This is known as Kechari Mudra or Vyoma Chakra. The triple junction makes that they know it's in Ajna Chakra, it's somewhere in here, but inside, on the inside, it's above the nostrils, it's about at the level of Manas Chakra, but inside is at the level of the bridge of the nose, but from inside, from behind the nose. And there, the yoga says that somewhere at the level of Ajna Chakra, the 3 nadis finish, because when you go to Sahasrara, you have only 1 nadi, Sushumna nadi, and therefore the Ida and Pingala, they meet, and there is a theory that this is a point called Triveni, and it has very special energy functions, and this is called the triple joint, the triple junction. 38. The yogin who manages to hold his tongue thus turned upwards, even for half a kshana, is freed from poisoning, disease, premature death, and old age. Kshana is a Sanskrit word which means an instant. And therefore some people say if you do it even a little bit, effects will be there. Most of the big yogis who interpreted this, they say that here kshana is used with a meaning of the smallest interval used by the yogis for meditation, which is a muhurta, which is 48 minutes. So for half of a kshana means actually for 24 minutes. So they say if you would be doing this touching there for 24 minutes, the effects would start appearing. That was 38. 39. For the one who succeeds in Kechari Mudra, there is no more disease, death, mental tiredness, sleep, hunger, thirst, or blackout, like swoon. No, like the functioning of the mind and of the body changes completely. It's a completely new chemistry. It's a completely new engineering. Mastering the Kechari Mudra, 40. One knows no disease and is no longer tied by karma, because Ajna Chakra burns the karma as well. Being free from the bonds of time. The word we use here is kala, and kala means time, but it also means death. So it says you are not getting old, you don't die. Remember, like that yogi, they found him in the forest. He was not aging. He was just in a state of trance, of suspended animation, where he had been there for years. His body did not show signs of old age or anything. So, again, you say, but he was there only for 5 or 6 years. Okay, then there are stories about others who have been much longer time in these conditions. 41. This mudra was called Kechari by the Siddhas. Siddhas means the perfect yogis, the great masters, because the mind moves in space, which is called Kha Charana, Kechari, just as the tongue goes in a space. The tongue goes to find that little opening, to touch the little opening, like when the doctor has pulled out one of your teeth and you are going with the tongue there all the time, like, I'm feeling my missing tooth. All of you have done that when you lost a tooth. And like there is such a hole, much smaller, somewhere back there, but it's too far to reach it normally with the tongue. So only when the tongue is long enough and separated from the bottom of the mouth, then it can reach that far up. 42. If one has sealed the cavity behind the uvula, it says, they use the word lambika, which in Sanskrit means the uvula, this thing. So they say it's a cavity behind the uvula, but they don't explain what it is or where it is. Maybe they didn't even know enough anatomy to explain exactly what it was. It was intuitive. You had to be shown by the guru or something. So he says, if one has sealed the cavity behind the uvula or lambika by Kechari Mudra, his semen, the word is used as bindu, it means the sperm for man, is not discharged even if he is embraced by a young, passionate woman. This is one of the shlokas which is used in support of the fact that Hatha yogis often did sexual tantra, because like, why would you mention this? No, like who would try it? No, so basically they said even when you have intercourse with a young and hot woman, so what would you do? But then if you put your tongue there while you have sex, you'd be as good as dead. So which woman wants to have sex with a man who goes like, at least his dick stays stiff, we suppose, If the heart stops beating, it doesn't lose the pressure. It's a weird, right? This is just yogic, scary weirdness, like where would you go? What would you do to your body? How far would you push the limits? 43. And even if the bindu moves down to the perineum, it says that sometimes the reflex of ejaculation can tend to occur. It can be held back and sucked up by the power of yoni mudra. These are two very rogue shlokas which suddenly go away from Kechari mudra, and they tell you that Kechari mudra can ensure perfect control of the sexual energy because it sublimes everything to Ajna chakra. And two, even if it would happen that you can stimulate the ejaculation in some way, then don't forget that it can be held back by doing yoni mudra. This deserves a lot of commentaries, but I will not do it right now because this is something which comes from Tantra. It's what we teach in the Tantra workshops for the men, how to do the retention, that there are some contractions down there in the perineum, and one of them in some yoga text, it's called yoni mudra. In this text itself, and in Geranda Samhita, yoni mudra is this. Or something like this, yeah? I'm doing it very approximately. How the heck are you going to stop your ejaculation? By closing your eyes and nostrils and so on. That's why is it? Because the names are changed, not on purpose, because India is a chaotic country. And because of this, some people call this yoni mudra, and then they say, this is what you do to control your sexual energy. Are you kidding me? You know? You would have sex with your girlfriend and then say, stop, I'm about to ejaculate, I have to do yoni mudra, you know? You will ejaculate like a pig, you know? It will not stop any ejaculation. Then you say yoni mudra doesn't work. Because it's not that yoni mudra, it's another yoni mudra. The yoni mudra of which they mention here, ridiculously enough, it is mentioned in Shiva Samhita. In Shiva Samhita it is described properly, and that's what we teach in Agama, in the Kundalini program of Agama. That yoni mudra is the yoni mudra about which they speak here. This yoni mudra of which they call yoni mudra in other texts, there it's called some other things. It has other names in the yoga tradition, Shanmukhi mudra and others, you know, like this one with the fingers and others. And they even hint to the fact that actually semen could have been moving a bit and stop it and bring it back, which is not yoni mudra anymore. It's a developed level from yoni mudra. It is what is called in Hatha yoga and Kundalini yoga and Tantric yoga, it's called Vajroli mudra. All these technologies, you learn them in Kundalini yoga, and these are very mysterious parts of yoga, very magic and mysterious parts of yoga. Again, not all the people in Agama do all these and so on. It's just some of them are really like the Bahishkrita Dauti, where you are supposed to swallow air and pass it through your anus. You know, how many people have done Bahishkrita Dauti, a sort of Shanka Prakshalana with air, Shanka Prakshalana with gas. It's described in your courses, but not many people have done it because it's a bit of an extreme, unusual technique, and then you can say it was not worth it, my time and my effort. You know, I'm doing a Shanka Prakshalana once every 2 months. That's good enough for me, you know. So in this way, that's why I say in yoga we have a lot of crazy stuff which can be done, but we don't necessarily do it everybody and all the time. So they had 2 shlokas which suddenly hinted at sexual practices and at the fact that the semen, the sperm, for men, it's written by men for other men, it's the equivalent for women, but you know that from the Tantra workshops, that the semen is not supposed to come out, and there are methods for holding it back and all that. And then 44 continues, it's a lot of praise. Like there are shlokas of praise, how great is this Kechari mudra alone. 44, with his tongue turned upwards and remaining steady, drinking the soma juice, the competent yogin conquers death doubtlessly in a fortnight. He says if you do Kechari mudra for 15 days, you conquer death. It's not a joke, it's a scary statement. You know, many people would say, come on, man. Well, let's cut our frenum right tonight. You know, it's like, are you kidding me? No, so indeed, the promises are very big. Because I have not practiced it, I cannot give you the details of if it works exactly like in the book or not. because I don't have that practical experience, and I just know only what the book says about this one and what I have heard anecdotally from one person on another. One said it's great, one said it's like, oh, it puts me in a slight state of trance in meditation. No, but that was not good enough. 45. The yogin whose body is daily filled by the nectar of the moon is not affected by poison, even if bitten by snakes or Takshaka himself. Takshaka is the king of the Nagas, the most poisonous king snake in the universe, like a super cobra, and basically it says even if you are bitten by a cobra, you don't die if you do this Kechari Mudra, because this Kechari Mudra brings in your system soma. Your pituitary gland produces something which changes everything forever. You are not a normal human being anymore, in the meaning that a lot of things change. 46. As fire does not go out while there is still fuel, and as light does not die as long as there is still oil in the wick, like in the oil lamps where the wick is wet with oil, so also the soul, they use here an expression which means dweller in the body, the one which dwells in the body, which means your soul, does not leave the body that is full of soma. So basically soma is eternal life. Theoretically they say if you keep soma in your body and every day you have soma, you don't die. Your soul will not leave the body. No? So this is basically would be the secret of physical immortality. 47. Here he makes a joke for 3 shlokas, which is a sort of a yogic sense of humor. The one who daily eats the meat of the cow, he uses in Sanskrit go mamsa. Mamsa is meat and go is the cow, and which is totally prohibited in India. It means to sacrifice a cow and to eat it. And drinks strong liquor, amara, varna, varuni, that's again booze, strong alcohol, brandy, which again is completely prohibited in Hinduism, under pain of losing your caste privileges. If you drink alcohol, you are an outcast. All the Hindus today, they drink like crazy, and therefore they are all of them outcasts without even realizing. So the one who drinks meat, cow meat, and drinks booze is deemed to be of noble family. The word used is kulin, from kula or kaula. Like you are a member of the kaula, you are a member of the noble family. The others are a disgrace to the clan, to their family. Like this is the real thing. Like, what do you mean? This is like, this many tantrics say, so we eat meat and we drink booze. That's the secret of Tantra. Then he explains, because he doesn't want to be scandalous on purpose, he says in 48, the word go designates the tongue, and therefore the meat of the cow is not the meat of it, it's the meat of the tongue. And eating the meat of the cow means here just sticking it into the cavity behind the palate, which destroys the 5 great sins. So it says, he who eats his tongue, and does kechari therefore, and by strong liquor, 49, is understood the stream of nectar that flows from the upper moon by the heat caused by the insertion of the tongue. They mention here that when you put the tongue on that point, there appears something which subjectively is felt like heat. It's actually, I've looked into it with my Ajna chakra, and it is the energizing of a nadi and of a point in there, and it feels like energizing. Subjectively, energizing sometimes is felt like heat. So you get that liquid to come. And here they give wonderful details. It's one of the few texts who goes there. 50, which means Svatmarama knew it in detail. When the tongue is kept in constant contact with the cavity, they call it the cavity, the entrance of the sphenoid sinus, remember, that's the point. The nectar flows and taste is following: salty, pungent, sour, like milk, honey, or ghee. So it basically says that the taste is changing because your pituitary gland is not used, and it's exactly like a woman who gets milk to her baby. The first milk is not really milk. When the baby sucks the breasts of a woman who is freshly a mother, In the beginning, her body is confused and says, what, milk, how, where, when, And the first liquid which comes from her boobs is not really milk, it's transparent in color. And then in 24 hours, 48 hours, the body starts producing milk. So in the same way, your pituitary gland in the beginning will produce all sorts of transitional chemicals, which we don't have a clue of what they are, and which feel with different tastes, which are described here. This is a treasure of knowledge. Imagine who knew these things. And this heals all this constant thing, heals all diseases, overcomes old age, and even attacks with a weapon are warded off. Like you are sitting in Kechari Mudra and somebody comes with a sword to cut you, and they cannot cut you. What the fuck is that? We have no explanation. It's a siddhi. It's like a siddhi from Ajna Chakra. It's a great siddhi, but it's not understood what it is. It bestows immortality, like physical immortality. The 8 great siddhis, so it's siddhis even bigger than that one, that you cannot be attacked by weapons. And the celestial damsels are attracted. This is what the Tibetans call dakinis, that they are female goddesses which are looking for young enthusiastic yogis to have some astral sex with them and develop spiritual relationships. And therefore, when you do Kechari Mudra, it's mentioned as one of the effects. You become eligible for that. 51. The yogin who holds the tongue upward and drinks the flow of nectar into the 16-petal lotus while meditating on the Supreme Shakti, so it's Kundalini, and while putting the prana to work by Hatha, so you have to do Hatha Yoga and move prana with Shakti Chalana, with other things, lives long and free from disease, his body soft and beautiful like the fiber of the lotus. As we know, old age is characterized by rigidity of the body, and the babies are very soft and watery. So a soft, watery tissue is the symptom of youthfulness. So they say to show that your body stays youthful, they compare it with the stem of a lotus, which is very flexible and soft and gentle. Drinking the flow of the nectar into the 16-petal lotus, many people think it's Vishuddha chakra, because among the chakras, only Vishuddha has 16 petals. That's wrong. There is a secondary chakra, which is called Soma chakra, which also has 16 petals, and which is right in the area of the head, exactly there. So it's another energy center, not Vishuddha chakra. I read commentaries from Swami Vishnu Devananda and said, you have to keep this Soma in the Vishuddha chakra. No, that's not true. It has to be kept in Soma chakra. 52, there are 3 shlokas left for tonight. I know it's a bit late, but we started late, and I want to just finish this subject of Kechari Mudra, to have it in one go. At the top of Mount Meru, that means at the end of the Sushumna Nadi, at the end of Sushumna, is the cavity which secretes the nectar, and where also resides the source of the 3 main nadis. Remember, that means that for them, it's the marrow of the spine, which continues in the brain stem, which is like a lingam from your throat in the middle of your brain, and it stops here somewhere, exactly at the level of Ajna. You have like a lingam inside your head, which is the brain stem, the amygdala, the hypothalamus, the whatever. And then on top of that, in between the hemispheres, there is the corpus callosum. There are some nerve. Again, you need to know anatomy to know the anatomy of the brain, that there are some nerve tissue which are in the middle, not like the left and right brain hemisphere, which are to the left and to the right. There is something which is in the middle. And therefore it says here that according to their understanding, Sushumna ends somewhere in the middle of the head, somewhere here, and Sahasrara is starting from there, sticking out through here and going up. But the root of Sahasrara is somewhere in the middle of your brain, at the corpus callosum. It's still related to the brain tissue. Exactly as for the other chakras, it's related to the marrow of the spine. Those of pure mind see therein the supreme truth or abode of Atman, because that's what Sahasrara is. The nectar flowing out of the upper moon causes the death of man. So when the nectar is going out of Soma chakra, it's consumed, it's lost, simply. And minute by minute, you get older and older until you die. It's like the sand in an hourglass, in a sand clock. It pours and pours until your ojas is finished, and then you die. Therefore, one must stop it by using this beneficial technique, take the Kechari Mudra, to stop it. There is no other means of achieving this perfection. It's very radical. It says if you want physical immortality, this is the technology. You have to do the Kechari Mudra, because otherwise you will not be able to conserve the Soma. 53. This cavity, in fact, is the meeting place of the 5 channels and the source of knowledge. That pure void is the place of Kechari Mudra. It's a bit unclear which are the 5 nadis, because normally there are 3 nadis and so on. It just tells that this middle of the brain thing above the brain stem, which is related to the pituitary gland and the pineal gland, there is a space in the middle of the brain. When you look at the section through the brain, you will see that the brain is like wrapped around its middle, and in the middle there is a small space, and in that space at one end there is the pituitary gland, and the other end, 5 centimeters away or so, there is the pineal gland. So these 2 glands are not in the brain, they are kind of enveloped by the brain, which has grown around them, and therefore that's where this cavity is, especially the pituitary gland in front. 54, the last statement, which is not technical anymore, it says there is only one seed generating the whole universe, and they refer to the mantra Aum. And there is only one mudra called Kechari. Like Aum is the essential mantra, Kechari is the one mudra. One deva without support, that is Mahadeva, Deva, Shiva, the Brahman of the Vedantins, the God with no support, not deities, but the real God, the one with void, and only one state of consciousness, Manon Mani, which was mentioned in the early chapters. If you remember, it will be mentioned in chapter number 4, where they speak about meditation and samadhi. So basically, this one says exactly as there is one Shiva, and there is one Manon Mani, the Unmani of the Manas, and exactly as there is one Aum, there is one Kechari Mudra, and that is some incredible thing. How did the yogis discover this? Nobody knows. And it's very, very secretive, even in the world of yoga, and very few people dare to do it. Even I, who have consecrated my life to yoga, until now, I have not done the Kechari Mudra, because I did not feel I had the security, the time, the gurus, the place for practice, and all the other conditions which were necessary for it. But nevertheless, the Kechari Mudra does exist, and it is described, and as far as we know, there are people who can give you initiation. Still, occasionally I hear that there is somebody in India or somebody who said that they can teach Kechari Mudra. I did not ask, for example, Dhirendra Brahmachari in 1993 when I met him. I did not go and ask him, Brahmachari ji, Dhirendra ji, teach me. Then if you say it should be done, can you teach me? How many months will it take for you to teach me? I can come and sit in your ashram here and you teach me. I did not do that. I had other things on my plate at that time. My life was going in a different way. And because of so therefore, occasionally, I'm not even saying that you cannot find some people who know practical details about it. Anyway, that was a long run. It was a long satsang today. I thought it would last less, but it is because I had a lot of collateral comments on this Kechari Mudra. This Kechari Mudra is very controversial, very colorful, very legendary, a bit scary, and also like, whoa, in yoga. I don't like the idea that it involves a self-mutilation, cutting parts of your body or something like that. But it also means that these people were trying to do something which no man has ever done before, and to go to places which by Mother Nature are like sealed and you don't discover them. As when we teach this about Kechari, because I teach about Kechari Mudra, but we don't do it practically in our Kundalini Yoga, then I tell to people even more. There are more connections and more things in the yoga tradition to be known about this Kechari Mudra. Anyway, enough for tonight. We have gone to the shloka 50 something, and then you'll see next time it talks about more mudras from Kundalini Yoga. The chapter number 3 is quite long. It goes to 120 shlokas or so. So there is way to go to describe the other mudras. None of them is going to be as radical as Kechari mudra. All the others are mudras which we do, we practice, we teach, and they are feasible with enough experience in yoga. Thank you all for joining tonight. See you on our next satsangs and activities here in Agama.